It was a chilly morning in Washington, D.C., the kind that made the marble columns of Capitol Hill seem colder than usual. The air buzzed with anticipation as President Donald J. Trump, now in his second term, stood behind the podium in the Rose Garden. The press had been called for an urgent and historic announcement. No leaks had reached the media. Not even the most seasoned White House correspondents had a clue. But insiders whispered that Elon Musk had been seen entering the White House through a private entrance the night before. "Elon and I have a big announcement," Trump began, a grin cutting across his face as cameras clicked furiously. "The gloves are off. It's time to build America. Not just bigger, but smarter, stronger, and more independent than ever before. And we're doing it without the political parasites who've drained this country for decades." Flanking him was Elon Musk, dressed in his usual minimalist black, arms crossed and nodding slightly. He wasn't one for speeches unless they involved Mars. But this time he was all in. "We're launching a new federal initiative, Project Phoenix," Trump said. "A $3 trillion public-private program focused on rebuilding America's critical infrastructure using cutting-edge tech. We're building the next generation of smart cities, spaceports, and domestic manufacturing hubs. And the key player behind it all, Elon Musk." Gasps, murmurs, and somewhere inside the Capitol building, Nancy Pelosi's morning espresso trembled in her hand. Pelosi, once the most powerful woman in American politics, had largely retreated from public life since Republicans seized control of both chambers. But behind the scenes, her influence in Democratic fundraising and lobbyist circles remained formidable. She still held court over a wide network of elite donors, environmental NGOs, and Silicon Valley influencers, many of whom were now being wooed by Musk and Trump's radical new plan. Within an hour of the announcement, liberal media went into overdrive. MSNBC was apoplectic. CNN wheeled out economists and ex-Biden advisors. A corporate coup, they called it. A fascist tech takeover. But what no one realized yet was that this wasn't just a tech and infrastructure deal. It was political chess at its most brutal. Pelosi's legacy, her climate initiatives, carbon tax structures, and environmental lobbying network, was about to be torched. The heart of Project Phoenix wasn't just in smart cities or manufacturing. It was in energy. Under this deal, Trump continued, "We will utilize Tesla's battery tech and SpaceX's satellite systems to power rural America with decentralized clean energy, without the red tape and bureaucratic garbage that's been holding us back for years. No more special favors for Chinese solar firms. No more kickbacks to the climate cartel." That one sentence hit Pelosi like a brick. Because back in 2022, she had been instrumental in pushing through tax credit legislation and investment loopholes that heavily favored overseas green tech suppliers, a move that quietly made her allies millions. Some of that wealth had been parked in shell companies, and Trump's DOJ had already started digging. Elon Musk didn't say much during the press conference. Just one short sentence. "America's future doesn't need gatekeepers." The deal would bypass traditional congressional oversight by classifying Project Phoenix under a national infrastructure emergency, a clause embedded in a post-COVID executive order reactivated by Trump weeks earlier. It was legal. Barely. But devastatingly effective. By sunset, Pelosi had called a closed-door meeting with top Democratic strategists. Her voice trembled with rage. "He's hijacked the country with a billionaire rocket man. We have to stop this." But for the first time in decades, Pelosi was playing defense. And the nightmare had only begun. Hours after the Trump-Musk announcement, a private email chain ignited among senior Democratic operatives and former Obama-era intelligence officials. The subject line, "Stop Phoenix at all costs." It wasn't just about politics anymore, it was about control. Pelosi, with decades of inside connections and a Rolodex thicker than a Bible, convened an emergency summit in San Francisco. The location? A discreet wine estate tucked away in Napa Valley where media drones couldn't fly and cell phones were checked at the door. The guest list included hedge fund titans, tech moguls aligned with the left, and a couple of former CIA officials who now worked in consulting. "This is bigger than Trump," Pelosi said as she took the head seat. "If we don't stop this deal, he'll gut our influence over the next generation of energy, tech, and infrastructure policy. And Elon Musk, that man wants to burn it all down." Someone whispered, "What do we have on Musk?" A chilling silence. Then a voice replied, "Not enough. Not anymore. Musk had cleaned house years ago. After being dragged through scandals and government inquiries, he became a ghost, no dirty texts, no leaked financials, no exploitable ties. He had outmaneuvered Silicon Valley's old guard by going rogue and playing both sides. His companies were too valuable, too global, too independent. Even the international elites in Davos feared how unpredictable he had become. Pelosi knew the only way to block Project Phoenix was to make it toxic, to weaponize the media and bury it under a scandal. We create the narrative, she said. Phoenix is a pipeline to corruption. It's authoritarian. It's anti-democratic. We leak internal documents, we launch congressional inquiries. We make Elon the villain again. And if necessary, we make him disappear from public favor entirely. But back in D.C., Trump and Musk were already 10 moves ahead. At the Department of Justice, Attorney General Pam Bondi had greenlit a sweeping investigation into overseas lobbying groups tied to former congressional leaders, particularly those involved in green energy funds from 2020 to 2024. Bondi wasn't subtle. She gave the press just enough breadcrumbs to start asking questions about Nancy Pelosi's nonprofit network. Simultaneously, a major independent journalism outlet, newly funded by a tech libertarian think tank, dropped a bombshell report titled "Green Gold: How Pelosi's Friends Made Billions Selling Climate Panic." The article traced millions in taxpayer subsidies that had gone to environmental shell companies in the Cayman Islands. Several of them had board members who were also donors to Pelosi-aligned super PACs. The timing wasn't coincidental. It was part of a meticulously orchestrated information war. And while Pelosi scrambled to control the narrative, Elon Musk launched Starlink V3 satellites, giving underserved rural states like West Virginia and Mississippi immediate access to free, high-speed internet. The symbolism was striking. While Pelosi fought to maintain legacy systems and coastal control, Musk and Trump were bringing the future to Middle America. On Fox News, Tucker Carlson, recently returned from a foreign assignment, aired a blistering monologue. This isn't about Democrats versus Republicans anymore. It's about the people versus the ruling class. Trump and Musk just kicked open the door to a future where bureaucrats and backroom lobbyists don't run the show. And Pelosi? She's scrambling because she knows the house of cards is about to fall. The polling data began shifting. Independents who had grown tired of political gridlock were suddenly energized. Young voters, disillusioned with corporate environmentalism, began praising Musk's decentralized energy goals. Even some moderate Democrats began questioning Pelosi's motives, wondering if her environmental legacy was more about profit than principle. Pelosi was cornered. Her only shot left? Unleash the intelligence community, or what remained of it under Trump's second-term shakeup, and hope the deep state still had teeth. She picked up her secure line and made a call. "I want everything you've got on Musk, classified, foreign, backdoor surveillance. I don't care how you get it. This is war." The next morning, an unmarked black SUV pulled up to a nondescript building on the outskirts of Langley, Virginia. Inside, a former high-ranking intelligence officer, codenamed Halberd, reviewed the list of names that had resurfaced on a newly declassified list of National Security Watch individuals. Elon Musk's name was back on it. Reactivated on Pelosi's request via unofficial channels, the intel machine had begun churning. But the game had changed. The agencies no longer operated in the shadows the way they once did. Trump's administration had spent the first 2 years of his second term gutting embedded bureaucrats and restructuring the National Intelligence Council. What remained was a fractured, less obedient intelligence apparatus, one that now feared public exposure more than partisan agendas. Still, Pelosi's allies tried. Within 72 hours, multiple mainstream media outlets, the New York Times, the Washington Post, Vice, simultaneously ran exclusive stories alleging that SpaceX satellites were collecting unauthorized user data in cooperation with the Department of Defense. The articles leaned on vague anonymous sources, blurry satellite images, and thin allegations. It was coordinated. It was aggressive. And it backfired. Within hours, Musk personally took to X, formerly Twitter, live streaming from inside a Starlink ground station. No spying. No backdoors. And here's our firewall system, open source, published today. Verify it yourself. The live stream peaked at 57 million viewers. Then, just as Pelosi was preparing a media blitz to double down, her worst nightmare came true, the leak. A whistleblower from the Environmental Investment Trust, EAT, a Pelosi-connected fund based in Zurich, released a trove of internal documents to a newly popular citizen journalism platform called Torchlight. The documents proved that during Pelosi's tenure as Speaker, over $600 million in federal funds earmarked for green energy had been diverted to private offshore accounts, many tied to Democrat bundlers and Pelosi's own family members. Hashtags exploded, hashtag Pelosi files and hashtag greengraft. Musk, ever the showman, posted a simple meme, a phoenix rising from flames with the caption, "We warned you." At the White House, Trump watched the firestorm with a smirk. "Let 'em scream," he told his chief of staff. "While they're chasing ghosts, we're laying fiber in every swing state." Project Phoenix had already broken ground in Ohio, Wisconsin, and Arizona. Factories were springing up. Tesla-powered mini-energy grids were being installed in towns that hadn't seen investment in decades. Drones delivered 3D printed materials. AI planned construction reduced costs by half. And the people, long forgotten by both parties, were noticing. Pelosi called a press conference, but it was a disaster. Shaking ice darting, she accused the Trump administration of orchestrating a smear campaign. She denounced Musk as a techno-fascist and warned that America was being sold to billionaires under the guise of innovation. But her words felt dated, out of touch. One reporter asked, "Mrs. Pelosi, what do you say to the documents showing your nonprofit funneled federal climate funds into overseas shell companies?" She froze. "No comment," she whispered, then abruptly left the podium. It was a symbolic moment, a titan of establishment politics visibly crumbling under the weight of a new political era. Later that night, Trump held a massive rally in Pennsylvania. Elon Musk made a surprise appearance. "I never thought I'd be on a stage like this," Musk said, half joking. "But sometimes you've got to stand up when the old guard tries to strangle progress. We're not destroying the future. We're building it." The crowd roared. Pelosi watched from her private residence, fists clenched, her empire burning around her. She had underestimated Musk. She had underestimated Trump. And now the gloves weren't just off, they were buried in the dirt. The fallout from the Pelosi files had begun spreading like wildfire. Wall Street shifted nervously. ESG investment groups tied to her family began hemorrhaging value. Key donors went silent. Democratic leaders scrambled to find distance. Even progressive firebrands refused to defend her publicly. The political queenmaker had become a liability overnight. Meanwhile, Trump's approval rating had surged to 58%. Among independents, he was polling better than any Republican president in modern history. And Musk? He wasn't running for office, but he didn't need to. He had become the face of a movement, a tech populist figure reshaping government from the outside in. Project Phoenix had now been rebranded by Trump's team as American Renaissance. And it wasn't just a program anymore, it was a national wave. Infrastructure projects had broken ground in 16 states, backed by AI-guided logistics, Tesla's modular building units, and SpaceX-powered communication towers. People in forgotten towns were getting jobs, Wi-Fi, and roads fast. Fox News and independent creators on platforms like Rumble and Locals began showcasing real-time footage of towns being revitalized. A viral video showed a formerly shut-down factory in Rust Belt, Michigan roaring back to life, emblazoned with a new sign, "Rebuilt by Americans, powered by Phoenix." Even left-leaning voters couldn't ignore it. Polling from nonpartisan outfits showed a growing Renaissance coalition forming, disaffected centrists, independents, libertarians, and even moderate Democrats gravitating toward this new tech government fusion. It wasn't about party anymore. It was about efficiency, disruption, and renewal. But in Pelosi's world, everything was unraveling. A grand jury convened in New York to investigate the EIT documents. Subpoenas flew. Her nephew, a top executive at one of the implicated nonprofits, had already lawyered up. Whispers of potential RICO charges echoed through political backchannels. And the DOJ, under the sharp and unrelenting direction of Attorney General Pam Bondi, was moving fast. CNN tried to revive the narrative, running an op-ed titled "Democracy in Crisis: Trump and Musk's Dangerous Tech Takeover." But by then, CNN's ratings had collapsed. Their trust index among viewers under 40 had fallen below 20%. Meanwhile, independent journalists and YouTubers were raking in millions of views, telling a very different story. The people didn't feel taken over. They felt heard. Pelosi wasn't done yet, though. Her last gambit? A massive protest movement, funded through old networks, publicized by media allies, and backed by climate activists and Hollywood elites. They branded it EarthGuard. Tens of thousands flooded D.C., some peaceful, some more radical. Protest signs read, "Stop the Musk monopoly," "Climate justice, not billionaire deals," and "This is our planet, not their project." Celebrities took to the stage. A-listers cried on camera. The press called it the Woodstock of resistance. But the energy didn't last, because the very next day, Trump and Musk invited every American to see the results with their own eyes. A national broadcast aired live drone tours of the Phoenix developments, from rural solar grids in Alabama to new Hyperloop transport tracks in Arizona. And in a shocking masterstroke of political theater, Trump gave the American public full real-time access to every single dollar being spent through a new blockchain-based transparency portal. Live contracts, open budgets, zero lobbyists. The message was clear: we're not hiding anything. Are they? Pelosi's protest fizzled. EarthGuard was exposed as being funded by the very same NGO dollars under federal investigation. The movement collapsed under the weight of its own hypocrisy. And in one final dagger, a former aide flipped. Under oath, he testified that Pelosi had personally signed off on the misuse of environmental funds to prop up friendly businesses. Businesses that just happened to funnel cash back into Democrat PACs. The courtroom sketches went viral. Nancy Pelosi, once an icon of liberal power, looked defeated, drawn, silent. She knew what came next. And Trump? He was preparing a rally like no other. It was a surreal evening in Washington, D.C. The Capitol Dome, bathed in soft gold light, stood as a silent witness to the political quake reshaping the nation. Inside the packed Lincoln Memorial, President Donald J. Trump stood shoulder to shoulder with Elon Musk. Behind them, a screen looped images of construction sites, job fairs, electric bus prototypes, and children in rural towns holding new tablets under SpaceX towers. They weren't just promising the future anymore. They were delivering it in real time. Trump stepped up to the podium, his voice thundering. For years ago, they said it couldn't be done. They said we were the problem, that we were dangerous. But look at this country today. Look at what happens when we unleash American innovation, remove the middlemen, and put the people back in charge of their own destiny. The crowd erupted. Musk followed with a quieter tone but no less impact. This isn't about left or right. This is about reality. Energy, infrastructure, communication, they don't belong to political parties. They belong to human beings. Project Phoenix is only the beginning. The cameras panned across the crowd: factory workers, engineers, veterans, young voters, black farmers from the South, former Union Democrats from the Midwest. It was a mosaic of people who had once felt ignored, abandoned, or played by both parties. Now they were rebuilding a country from the ground up. And then it happened. As if timed with cosmic irony, a news alert flashed on every screen across America. Breaking: Nancy Pelosi indicted on federal fraud and conspiracy charges. Gasps filled the air. Some people cheered. Others just stared, stunned. It wasn't just about Pelosi anymore. It was about the old system and how quickly it could collapse when truth, tech, and transparency aligned. A reporter from the Wall Street Journal commented live, "This moment is as big as Watergate." Pelosi was more than just a speaker. She was a symbol of establishment control, political manipulation, and the fusion of power and profit. And now, it's all crumbling. In San Francisco, at her once bustling private estate, Pelosi watched the indictment coverage unfold. Her team had dwindled. Her lawyers were scrambling. Her publicists had stopped returning calls. She was politically exiled, awaiting a trial that could unravel everything she had built. For decades, she had pulled the strings behind the curtain. Now the curtain was in flames. Meanwhile, Pam Bondi, now hailed as the people's prosecutor, vowed to expand the investigation into other climate-linked financial corruption. Her office had opened 47 new cases. Several prominent Democratic strategists had already been subpoenaed. In one last act of poetic symbolism, Trump signed an executive order, live on stage, launching a new federal initiative called Reclaim America, aimed at dismantling monopolistic lobbying firms and redirecting billions in federal contracts to locally owned businesses in Phoenix-certified zones. With the stroke of a pen, the crowd roared again. He pointed toward the crowd. "This is your country now, not theirs." Elon Musk, never much for sentimentality, simply nodded. Then he raised his hand, index finger pointing to the sky, a subtle signal to the control team at SpaceX. Moments later, a massive Starlink satellite launched overhead, cutting through the stars above the Capitol like a comet. It was history in motion. By the end of the year, over 30 states had signed onto the American Renaissance Partnership. Schools were digitized. Roads were rebuilt using AI logistics. Crime was down. Tech literacy had soared. And Americans, for the first time in years, felt like they were in charge again. Donald Trump, older but sharper than ever, was more than a president now. He was a movement leader. Elon Musk, despite refusing all offers to run for public office, had become a national figure of revolutionary innovation, both praised and feared. And Nancy Pelosi? She spent her days in courtrooms and closed chambers, defending an empire that once ruled Washington, now reduced to cautionary tale. The old ways were gone, the gloves were off, and the future had officially arrived.